Transmission: the fox who should not have tried. Human alcohol. Lyra burst into uncontrollable laughter as she dropped directly into the human's lap. "Human," she giggled, "you said this drink was light." Daniel barely caught the glass before it spilled. "I said it was light for humans." Lyra leaned closer, squinting at his face with drunken concentration. "You have very symmetrical eyes," Daniel sighed. "Oh no, she's drunk." Hello, traveler. If you're hearing this signal, then the transmitter is behaving tonight, which is never guaranteed in deep space. I am the stray vulpine who gathers these stories, a wandering fox drifting between systems with a small archive and far too much curiosity about humans. Before tonight's story begins, I should mention something. Maintaining long-range transmissions like these requires energy credits, data storage, and a surprising amount of patience with malfunctioning equipment. If you enjoy these stories and wish to help keep the signal alive, there is a small allied outpost known as the Vulpine Den, where members of the fleet help power the archive. The coordinates to that outpost can be found in the comments below. Now then, traveler, the story you're about to hear is one I discovered in the logs of a quiet frontier station. It begins with a very simple mistake. A Vulpine woman, a human man, and one glass of human alcohol. If you have ever met a Vulpine, you may already suspect where this is going. Let us begin. The bar aboard Orion Trade Station was warm and noisy. Cargo crews filled most of the tables, their laughter mixing with the low hum of the station's life support systems. Neon lights glowed along the walls, reflecting off bottles and metal surfaces, while an old Earth song drifted lazily through the air. At a small corner table sat an unusual pair, a human and a Vulpine woman. Her name was Lyra. Bright orange hair framed her face, her fox ears flicking occasionally at the shifting noise around them. Her tail, large, soft, and currently swaying slowly behind her chair, brushed the floor in relaxed arcs. In front of her sat a glass. Lyra stared at it suspiciously. "Human," she said slowly. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Yes? You are certain this beverage is safe?" "It's whiskey." "That does not answer my question." Daniel chuckled. "It's safe. Humans drink it all the time." Lyra leaned forward and sniffed it. Her nose wrinkled immediately. "It smells like fuel." "That's pretty accurate." Her ears lowered slightly. "You are trying to poison me." "I am absolutely not trying to poison you." "You might be," she said thoughtfully. "Humans are unpredictable." Daniel gestured toward the glass. "You asked to experience human culture." "Yes." "Well," he said, "this is part of it." Lyra studied the drink like it might attack. Her tail swayed thoughtfully behind her. "If I perish," she said solemnly, "I will haunt you." "You'll be fine." She grabbed the glass. Daniel immediately leaned forward. "Whoa, maybe sip it." Too late. Lyra tipped the glass back and swallowed the entire drink. Daniel froze. "Oh no." Lyra placed the empty glass on the table. For a moment she sat perfectly still. Her ears twitched, her eyes widened. Then, "Fire!" Daniel burst out laughing. She grabbed the edge of the table. "Human, my throat is under attack." "That's the whiskey." "You gave me liquid combustion. You weren't supposed to chug it." Lyra blinked several times, her ears drooping slightly as the alcohol hit her system. Then she slowly turned to him. "Human." "Yes?" "You are blurry." Daniel sighed. "Yeah, that tracks." Lyra leaned forward across the table, studying Daniel with intense concentration. You have two heads. I definitely don't. Maybe three. Her tail wagged once. Then she started laughing. Not a polite laugh, not a quiet laugh, but bright, uncontrollable laughter that turned several nearby heads. Daniel blinked. You okay? No, she said happily. I feel wonderful. She stood up, immediately swayed, then collapsed sideways, directly into his lap. Daniel caught her out of pure reflex. Lyra giggled. Oh. She adjusted herself comfortably across his knees. Her tail flopped dramatically across the chair behind them. She leaned closer to his face. Human. Yes, Lyra. You are warm. That's how humans work. She poked his cheek. You are also very handsome. Daniel groaned. Oh, this is bad. Lyra smiled lazily, then wrapped her arms loosely around his shoulders. Across the bar, the bartender stopped polishing a glass and watched with open amusement. Lyra noticed. Her ears twitched toward him. Human. Yes? The beverage keeper is observing us? I know. Do you think he approves? Daniel sighed. I think he thinks this is hilarious. Lyra nodded thoughtfully. It is hilarious. She leaned even closer to Daniel. Human. Yes? My tail likes you. Daniel closed his eyes. This night had gone completely off the rails. Luckily, humans are extremely patient creatures, which is fortunate, because Lyra was only just beginning to discover what human alcohol could do. And Daniel was about to learn how affectionate a drunk Vulpine could become. Lyra had decided with absolute drunken certainty that Daniel's lap was now her seat. Daniel, unfortunately, had no authority to veto the decision. Lyra, he said carefully, keeping one arm around her waist so she didn't slide off the chair. You can't just sit on people like this. She blinked slowly. Why not? Because that's... He glanced around the bar. 3 nearby cargo haulers were openly watching now, grinning like they had just found the evening's entertainment. Not normal. Lyra followed his gaze. Her ears twitched. She leaned close to Daniel and whispered loudly enough for half the bar to hear. Are they jealous? Daniel nearly dropped his glass. No, they look jealous. They are not jealous. Lyra narrowed her eyes suspiciously at the miners. Her tail flicked once. Then she turned back to Daniel and smiled mischievously. Well, they cannot have this seat. This seat is not... She wiggled slightly in his lap. A seat. Daniel froze. Lyra, yes, human, please stop moving. But I am comfortable. That's not the issue. She tilted her head. You are making a very strange face. That's because you're sitting on me. Yes, she said matter-of-factly. I noticed. Then she giggled again. Daniel rubbed his forehead. This was a disaster. A fluffy disaster. Vulpines are affectionate creatures by nature. Humans, however, tend to require warning before a fox decides to occupy their lap in public. My tail always twitches when humans encounter this particular cultural difference. Now then, let us return to Daniel, who was doing his best to remain calm. Lyra leaned closer to his face again, studying him with intense curiosity. Human. Yes, you are thinking very hard. I'm trying to keep you from falling. I am not falling. She immediately leaned sideways. Daniel grabbed her before she tipped off the chair. Lyra burst into delighted laughter. See? I literally just caught you. Yes, she said happily. You are very good at catching vulpines. That's not a skill I expected to need tonight. Her tail wagged lazily behind her. Then she poked his cheek again. Human. Yes, Lyra. You are very warm. You mentioned that. And handsome. You mentioned that too. She squinted at him thoughtfully. I should compliment you more. You really shouldn't. I disagree, Daniel sighed. Across the bar, the bartender leaned on the counter. First time drinking? He called out. Daniel looked over. Is it that obvious? The bartender chuckled. Son, that fox chugged a whiskey. Lyra raised a finger proudly. I defeated it. Daniel groaned. You did not defeat it. The bartender slid a glass of water down the counter toward them. Give her that. Daniel took it gratefully and set it on the table. Lyra, water. Lyra stared at the glass. That is not alcohol. No, she looked offended. It has no personality. It's water. It tastes like responsibility. Daniel pinched the bridge of his nose. Drink it. Lyra leaned forward and sniffed it suspiciously. You are tricking me again. I'm hydrating you. That sounds suspicious. Lyra. She sighed dramatically and took a sip. Her ears drooped. Terrible. It's water. She leaned back against him again, clearly deciding the effort of sitting upright was unnecessary. Her head rested against his shoulder. For a moment she was quiet. Then she tilted her face up toward him again. Human. Yes, you are very nice. Daniel blinked. That came out of nowhere. She tapped his chest lightly. You caught me. That's what people do. Not always. Daniel didn't answer. Lyra studied his face again with soft, unfocused curiosity. Then she smiled slowly. I like humans. That's good. You let Vulpines sit on you. That is absolutely not a human tradition. It should be. Daniel laughed despite himself. You're ridiculous. Maybe. Her tail swished happily. Then she spotted something. Her ears perked. Oh. Daniel followed her gaze. The bar. More specifically, the bottles behind it. Lyra's eyes widened. Human. No. You did not even hear my request. I know exactly what your request is. But no more alcohol. Lyra pouted. Her ears drooped dramatically. But it made everything funny. That's exactly the problem. She crossed her arms and leaned closer to him again. What if I drink slowly this time? Daniel stared at her. You chugged the last one. I was curious. You're still curious. Yes, that's the problem. Lyra looked deeply disappointed. Then she brightened suddenly. Human. Yes, carry me. Daniel blinked. What? I do not trust gravity anymore. You were walking fine earlier. That was before the fire drink? Daniel stared at her. Lyra looked back with wide, hopeful eyes. Her tail wagged. Carry the fox. Daniel sighed. Across the bar, the bartender chuckled. Good luck, buddy. Daniel stood up carefully. Lyra immediately wrapped her arms around his neck. Victory, she whispered, happily. Daniel shook his head. This was going to be a very long walk to the docking bay. There is something fascinating about humans. When faced with chaos, they rarely abandon someone, even if that chaos is a very drunk foxwoman. And Daniel was about to learn something else, because Lyra had only just begun to feel the full effects of human alcohol. And Vulpines tend to become very affectionate when intoxicated. Daniel had barely taken 3 steps away from the table before he realized 2 things. First, Lyra was far more comfortable being carried than he expected. And second, she had absolutely no intention of behaving. Her arms were looped around his neck, her cheek resting against his shoulder while her tail swayed lazily behind them. Every now and then, she would giggle softly to herself, as if remembering something hilarious that no one else could hear. "Lyra," Daniel said carefully as they moved through the bar, "you need to stop squirming." "I am not squirming. You are absolutely squirming. I am adjusting. You adjusted 4 times. That is because humans are not shaped correctly." Daniel blinked. "Not shaped." She shifted slightly again, settling more comfortably against him. "There," she murmured. "That is better." Daniel sighed. Across the room, a few patrons were openly grinning now. The bartender leaned on the counter again. "Careful," he called. "They get clingy when they're drunk." Lyra lifted her head immediately. "I am not clingy." Daniel didn't even look back. "She's clingy." Lyra narrowed her eyes at him. "I am affectionate." "That's the same thing." "No, it isn't." Her tail flicked in mild offense before she leaned closer to his ear. "Human." "Yes?" "You smell nice." Daniel nearly walked into a chair. "That's a weird thing to say." "It is not." Her nose twitched slightly as if confirming the observation. "You smell warm." "That's not how smell works." "It does for vulpines." Daniel shook his head. "Lyra, please don't start sniffing me." "I am not sniffing." She sniffed him again. "Okay, maybe a little." Daniel muttered something under his breath. Lyra giggled again, clearly pleased with herself. They reached the exit corridor leading toward the docking bays. The noise of the bar faded behind them, replaced by the quieter hum of the station's ventilation systems. Lyra lifted her head again, her golden eyes studying his face from very close range. "Human. Yes, you are very patient. That's because you're drunk. You keep saying that like it is a bad thing." "It's not good." She leaned even closer, her ears twitching as she examined him like a curious animal. "You know something interesting?" "I'm almost afraid to ask." "You are very serious." "That's because I'm trying to keep you from falling." Lyra tilted her head. Then she smiled slowly. "I think I like serious humans." Daniel stopped walking. "Lyra." "Yes?" "You are dangerously close to flirting again." She blinked. "Was I?" "Yes." She considered that. Then her tail wagged. "Maybe a little." Daniel groaned quietly. Lyra laughed softly and rested her chin against his shoulder again, clearly enjoying the situation far too much. For a moment, they walked quietly down the corridor. Then Lyra suddenly poked his cheek again. "Human. Yes. Your face does a lot of thinking. That's because you keep doing unpredictable things." She smiled. "That makes life interesting." Daniel sighed. "You're going to regret this tomorrow." "I regret nothing." Her tail swayed happily behind them. Then she looked at him again, her voice softer now. "Human. Yes? I am glad you came with me tonight." Daniel blinked. "That came out of nowhere." "No, it didn't." She gave him a slightly crooked smile. "I wanted to see human culture. You saw it. I also discovered something." "And what's that?" Lyra leaned closer, her voice dropping conspiratorially. "Humans are very good pillows." Daniel nearly tripped. "Lyra, yes. You cannot say things like that while sitting in my arms." "Why not?" "Because you're making this very difficult." She giggled again. "Oh." Then she added quietly, "Good." Daniel stared at the corridor ceiling. This was absolutely going to haunt him later. Traveler. Humans often underestimate how direct vulpines can become when our inhibitions disappear. Alcohol does not invent our thoughts. It merely removes the filter. My tail flicks every time I hear this part of the story, because poor Daniel had not yet realized something very important. Lyra wasn't just being playful. She meant every word. And the docking bay was still a very long walk away. Daniel made it halfway, down the corridor before he realized something. Fighting this situation was pointless. Lyra had settled comfortably in his arms, her tail swaying lazily behind them, while her head rested near his shoulder. Every few steps, she would giggle quietly, clearly enjoying the way the world seemed to sway around them. He had started the night trying to manage her. Now he was mostly trying not to laugh. Human, Daniel sighed softly. Yes, Lyra. You stopped scolding me. I noticed. Her ears twitched with obvious satisfaction. That is good. I'm not sure it is. She leaned back slightly so she could look at him properly, golden eyes bright and relaxed now. You were very serious earlier. I was trying to keep you from drinking more. That was mean. That was responsible. Lyra smiled slowly. But now you are less serious. Daniel hesitated. That was true. Somewhere between catching her from falling over, carrying her through the station, and listening to her ramble about how water had no personality, his strict determination had started to soften. She had that effect. Lyra noticed immediately. Her tail gave a happy swish. I like this version of you. Daniel raised an eyebrow. There are versions? Yes. She held up a finger, listing them. Serious human. He nodded. That checks out. Embarrassed human. Also accurate. Her smile widened. And this one. And what's this one? Lyra leaned a little closer in his arms. Amused human. Daniel tried to keep a straight face. It didn't work. Lyra's ears perked instantly when she saw the small smile escape him. There it is, she declared happily. That is the face. Daniel laughed quietly. You're ridiculous. Maybe. Her tail wagged again. She shifted slightly in his arms, adjusting her position so she could relax more comfortably against him. The movement brought her a little closer. A little warmer. Daniel stiffened slightly. Lyra noticed immediately. Her eyes sparkled with playful curiosity. Human. Yes? You are tense again. That's because you keep moving. I am comfortable. You're pressing into me. She blinked. Oh. Then she smiled. Slowly. Is that a problem? Daniel looked down at her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Lyra's ears twitched softly, her expression relaxed and curious rather than teasing now. She leaned forward just a little more, resting more fully against him, as if testing something. Daniel exhaled slowly. Lyra, yes? You're very affectionate when you're drunk. Vulpines are affectionate when we like someone. Her voice was softer now, honest. Daniel didn't immediately respond. Lyra studied his face for a moment, then her tail swayed again in quiet satisfaction. You stopped pulling away. I noticed. She tilted her head slightly. Then something small and unexpected happened. A soft rumbling sound. Daniel blinked. Was that? Lyra giggled. Yes. You're purring. It happens sometimes. The sound deepened slightly as she relaxed further against him, clearly pleased. Daniel shook his head in disbelief. You're literally purring. Humans are very comfortable. That's not a sentence I expected tonight. Lyra laughed softly again, her head resting briefly against his shoulder. Human? Yes? I like you. Daniel blinked. That's the alcohol talking. Lyra's ears flicked. No, She lifted her head again, golden eyes meeting his. I liked you before the alcohol. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. Lyra watched him quietly for a moment. Then, her mischievous smile slowly returned. But the alcohol made me brave enough to say it. Daniel sighed. That's dangerous. Why? Because you're drunk. Lyra leaned closer again. Her tail swayed happily. And you are still holding me. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. She had a point. Humans often believe they are the ones protecting Vulpines, and in many ways, they are. But what they rarely realize is that sometimes a Vulpine simply chooses to trust them, and that choice can be far more powerful than alcohol. Now then, let us return to Daniel, because he had just realized something very dangerous. He didn't want to put her down. The docking corridor was quieter than the rest of the station. Soft lights ran along the ceiling, reflecting faintly off the metal floor as Daniel walked, Lyra still comfortably settled in his arms. The hum of station machinery echoed gently through the hallway, the noise of the bar now far behind them. Lyra seemed calmer here, still drunk, but calmer. Her head rested lightly against his shoulder again, her ears twitching every now and then when distant sounds carried down the corridor. Daniel glanced down at her. You still awake? Mm-hmm. Her voice was softer now. You stopped talking, he said. I am thinking. That's concerning. She giggled quietly, then her tail swayed once behind them. Human. Yes, Lyra. You never answered my question earlier. I'm afraid to ask which one. The one about liking you. Daniel slowed his steps slightly. Oh. Lyra lifted her head again so she could look at him properly. Her golden eyes were still slightly unfocused from the alcohol, but the curiosity behind them felt very real. You said it was the alcohol talking. That's usually how it works. But you didn't answer. Daniel exhaled slowly. Lyra, yes? You're drunk. Yes. And tomorrow you might not even remember half of this? She tilted her head thoughtfully. That is possible. So, it wouldn't really be fair to answer that seriously right now. Lyra watched him quietly for a moment. Then, she leaned a little closer again. Human. Yes? You are overthinking again. That's kind of my job tonight. She smiled faintly. I like that about you. Daniel shook his head. You're impossible. No. Her tail swayed again. I am curious. He raised an eyebrow. About what? Lyra studied his face carefully. About why you are still holding me. Daniel blinked. What? You could have put me down a long time ago. That's because you can barely walk. I can walk. You nearly fell over 3 times. She giggled. That is unrelated. Daniel chuckled despite himself. Lyra watched him quietly again. Then she shifted slightly in his arms, settling comfortably as if she had no intention of moving anytime soon. Human. Yes. Do you want me to get down? Daniel paused mid-step. He looked down at her. Lyra's ears flicked softly, her expression relaxed and curious. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel sighed. No. Lyra's tail wagged immediately. I knew it. Daniel rolled his eyes. You're enjoying this way too much. Yes. She didn't even hesitate. Very much. Daniel laughed quietly. You're unbelievable. Lyra leaned closer again, clearly pleased with herself. Human. Yes? You are smiling again. Am I? Yes. Her voice dropped into a playful whisper. I like when you smile. Daniel shook his head again. You're going to be very embarrassed about this tomorrow. Lyra shrugged lazily in his arms. That is a problem for future Lyra. Future Lyra is going to hate current Lyra. Future Lyra is boring. Daniel laughed again. They reached the end of the corridor where the docking bays opened into a wide chamber filled with small civilian ships. Lyra's ears perked slightly as the larger space opened around them. "That's your ship over there, right?" Daniel asked. She nodded slowly. "Mm-hmm." He carried her toward it. But as they approached the ramp, Lyra suddenly wrapped her arms around his neck a little tighter. "Human, yes?" Her voice was quieter now, more thoughtful. "Thank you." Daniel paused. "For what?" "For catching me." "You mean when you almost fell off the chair?" "That too." Her tail swayed gently behind them. "But also," she hesitated, "for staying." Daniel didn't answer right away. Lyra rested her head against his shoulder again. The soft, rumbling purr returned quietly. Daniel exhaled slowly. "You're welcome." Lyra smiled against his shoulder, and for a moment, neither of them seemed in any hurry to move. Traveler, humans do something remarkable. Across the galaxy, I have seen powerful empires, advanced civilizations, and species capable of incredible things. But humans will carry someone home, even when they barely understand why. But this story was not quite finished yet, because Lyra had one more very important question to ask, and Daniel was about to learn that drunk Vulpines can be extremely honest. Lyra was still in Daniel's arms when they reached the small ramp leading to her ship. The docking bay was quieter than the corridors behind them. Only the distant hum of station engines filled the air, and a few scattered lights reflected softly off the metal floor. Daniel stopped at the base of the ramp. "Well," he said gently, "this is your stop." Lyra didn't move. Her arms were still loosely around his shoulders. Her tail swayed slowly behind her. "Human." "Yes, Lyra." She studied his face for a moment, her golden eyes softer now. The drunken haze was still there, but something else had crept into her expression. Curiosity. The same curiosity that had gotten her into trouble all night. "You said humans are honest when they drink." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Sometimes." Lyra nodded thoughtfully. "Vulpines, too." "That tracks." She leaned a little closer. "So I should ask my question now." Daniel blinked. "Your question?" "Yes." Her ears flicked slightly. The mischievous smile from earlier was back, but quieter now, more thoughtful. Daniel shifted slightly. "Lyra, I'm suddenly concerned." "You should not be. That does not make me less concerned." She giggled softly. Then she took a breath. "Human, yes?" Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "I think I would like to mate with you." Daniel froze. The entire docking bay seemed to go silent. "You what?" Lyra nodded seriously. "Yes." Daniel stared at her. "Lyra, yes? You cannot just say that." "Why not?" "Because that is a very big sentence." She tilted her head. It seemed clear. It was extremely clear. She smiled slightly. "That is good communication." Daniel covered his face with one hand. "You're drunk." "Yes." "You're very drunk." "Also yes." She leaned forward again, resting lightly against his chest, her tail swaying lazily behind her. "But I am also curious." Daniel exhaled slowly. "Lyra, yes. You're going to wake up tomorrow and regret saying that." She considered that for a moment. "Maybe." Then she looked back at him with that same soft curiosity. "But maybe not." Daniel lowered his hand. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Lyra's ears flicked slightly. "Human, Yes. If the answer is no, her voice softened. You can still carry me up the ramp. Daniel stared at her. Then he laughed quietly. You know what? What? You're impossible. Lyra smiled. That seems to be the consensus tonight. Daniel shook his head again. Then he looked at the ship behind her, then back at Lyra. Let's get you inside first. Her tail wagged instantly. That is not a no. That is not a yes either. But it is interesting. Daniel sighed. You're unbelievable. Lyra leaned closer again, clearly pleased with herself. Human. Yes, I like interesting. Daniel laughed again, then carried her up the ramp. Traveler, this is the moment where my tail always flicks in amusement. Vulpines are curious creatures. Humans, however, are cautious. But when those two traits meet, very interesting things can happen. And sometimes, the next part of the story is best left inside the archive. Morning light filtered softly through the small viewport of Lyra's ship. The stars beyond it drifted slowly as Orion Station rotated in the distance, casting long silver reflections across the cabin walls. Daniel woke first. For a moment, he simply stared at the ceiling, the quiet hum of the ship's systems filling the room. Then he became aware of two things. First, he was lying in Lyra's bunk. Second, Lyra was curled up beside him. Her tail was draped comfortably across both of them like an oversized blanket, and one of her ears twitched slightly as she slept. Daniel blinked slowly. Well, he murmured. That escalated. Lyra stirred. Her ears flicked once, then twice. Golden eyes opened slowly. She blinked up at the ceiling, then turned her head and saw him. For a moment she said nothing, then her ears folded flat. Oh, Daniel chuckled quietly. Morning. Lyra groaned softly and covered her face with one hand. Human. Yes? I believe I may have made several questionable decisions last night. That's one way to put it. Her tail tightened slightly around them. How bad? Daniel thought about that. Well, he said carefully, at one point, you declared war on a glass of whiskey. Lyra sighed into her hands. That sounds accurate. And you also told me my face does a lot of thinking. Still true. Daniel smiled faintly. Then he hesitated. Lyra? She slowly peeked at him between her fingers. Yes? Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. I was going to ask something. That sounds dangerous. Probably. He exhaled. Do you regret it? Lyra stared at him for exactly 1 second. Then she immediately shook her head. No. Daniel blinked. That was fast. I did not need to think about it. Her ears slowly lifted again as she looked at him more carefully. Do you regret it? Daniel laughed softly. No. Lyra's tail wagged instantly. Oh, good. She relaxed back into the pillow, clearly relieved. For a moment, they lay there quietly. Then Lyra glanced at him again, her expression slightly more thoughtful now. Human. Yes. I may still be slightly embarrassed. That's fair. But I am not unhappy. Daniel smiled. Good. She watched him for a moment longer. Then she tilted her head slightly. Human. Yes. If I am remembering correctly. Daniel raised an eyebrow. That's a dangerous phrase. I may have asked you a question last night. You asked a few. Her ears twitched. The important one. Daniel chuckled. Oh, that one. Lyra buried her face in the pillow for a moment. Yes. Daniel leaned back slightly against the headboard. Well, technically you didn't ask. I made a proposal. You made a very direct proposal. She peeked up at him again. And Daniel looked at her. Then he shrugged lightly. I'm still here. Lyra stared at him. Her tail wagged again. That sounds promising. Daniel laughed. It might be. She studied him for another moment. Then she smiled. Human. Yes? I believe humans have a term for this situation. Oh, yes. Her ears perked slightly. Dating. Daniel chuckled. That's exactly the term. Lyra seemed pleased with that answer. Her tail swished happily across the blanket. Good. She shifted slightly closer again. Because I would like to continue studying human culture. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Is that what we're calling it? Yes, she smiled mischievously. It is very educational. Daniel laughed again. Somehow I knew you'd say that. Lyra relaxed comfortably beside him, her tail settling around them both once more. Human? Yes? I am glad you caught me last night. Daniel smiled softly. Me too. Traveler. Humans often believe the most important stories in the galaxy are about wars, heroes, and great victories. But the longer I wander among the stars, the more I think the smaller stories matter just as much. A human carrying a drunk fox home. A question asked with too much honesty, and two curious souls deciding to see what happens next. The archive contains many tales of humans and vulpines, but stories that begin with laughter often last the longest. Thank you for listening to this transmission. And, traveler, until the next story drifts across the stars, stay curious. If you're still here, then thank you for listening all the way to the end of this transmission. If you'd like to help this stray fox keep the story beacon burning, consider visiting the Vulpine Den, linked in the description. Members of the Vulpine Den there help power the transmitters and gain access to early signals, hidden stories from the archive, and a few extra transmissions that never quite make it onto the public channels. But whether you join the den or simply continue traveling with these broadcasts, thank you for keeping the signal alive. Until the next transmission, traveler, this is the Stray Vulpine signing off.